All right, welcome everyone. We will get started. If you didn't get a chance to answer the opening question, please still feel free to. We want to hear from you. The question is, when was the first time you had a Black teacher and how did it impact you? And if you can go to the next slide, what sort of inspired this question is really our youth. I get a really strong feel as a teacher for what students care about through just the things they share, the things they choose to comment on. And one thing that was kind of interesting was that a lot of students were sharing this viral prompt, in particular in relation to Black male teachers. It asked, if you come across this tweet, reply with the first grade you were in when you had your first Black male teacher. And I reposted it, and this is only a fraction of the responses I got. Most of this group is under 25. A lot of them my former students, some of them my current students. And this is a question, an experience that a lot of young people are interested in and reflecting on. And it should make us think like, okay, if this matters to our young people, then it should matter to us as well. And there's a reason that they're interested in this question. It has an impact on their learning experience. And then we're becoming very conscious of that now. If we can move to the next slide, I do want to acknowledge, before we get into our presentation, the tragedy that took place in Buffalo, New York over the weekend. This is a really hard time, I think, for a lot of people. And I know for me, as a Black educator, a lot of times it feels like, we spent a lot of time, building up our young people, and we seem to be making progress in certain areas. And then things like this happen, and it just makes us realize that there's a lot of work to be done in this country in relation to protecting Black lives and Black communities. This was, an incident where someone targeted a Black community and was motivated by some really, really dangerous philosophies that are being presented in this country. So we want to honor the 10 Black lives that were lost over the weekend. And I think it should just encourage us to continue fighting for what is right so that our students can feel safe, not only in schools, but in the different spaces that they enter. I'm going to pass it on to Mike.
Yeah, well, before I take over, Haben, do you mind just introducing yourself, your role at HSRA quickly?
Yes, I'll start. My name is Haben. I am a lead math facilitator at the High School for Recording Arts.
May I add, and you just got your master's degree?
I did. I just graduated with my master's this Saturday, and with a master's in education. Thank you.
Thank you, Haben, and welcome everybody to the intensive Grow Your Own at High School for Recording Arts presentation at the Student-Centered Learning for Equity Conference of 2022. You've met Haben. My name is Michael Lipset. I'm the Director of Social Impact at the High School for Recording Arts and our new sister organization, For Learning. And I'm actually just going to pass it straight to Tony, who's going to introduce himself and get into the contents of today's presentation.
Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Haben. I'm Tony Simmons. I'm the Executive Director at High School for Recording Arts. I helped to create it with our founder, David T.C. Ellis. We received our charter in 1998, and I'm going to talk a little bit later more about the history of HSRA as we get into this particular topic. I also, I'm at the High Tech High Graduate School of Education, where I founded and co-lead the New School Creation Fellowship there and the Center for Love and Justice. And one of the things that is really, really important to me as I think about starting a new school in terms of staffing, in terms of the culture that you're trying to create and the young people you're serving, is recognizing how important it is to have staffing that looks like the students that you're working with. As Haben just talked about, that's really important to our young people. They're very conscious of that. It's something that we know through research makes a huge difference. So we're going to talk about what we're doing at High School for Recording Arts in a number of different ways to address that. But first, I came across an article, and a broadcast on NPR about a week or two ago about a young man's experience having an African-American teacher for the first time in his experience, just like we asked you. So we have a link in the chat. We would just like for you to read it. It should take around maybe 7 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes to read it, and then just have a little popcorn reaction to what you read. Well, I could start. One thing that really stood out to me was when he reconnected with his classmates. I think he said 30 of them. And here he is as a grown man now, remembering that one day encounter, and none of his classmates who it seemed was pretty clear weren't Black, seemed to have remembered him as his Black teacher. And that really stood out to me. How such an impact could happen so quickly in one day for him, and not seen at all by others. Although we know too with research that even with white kids, a teacher of color who I assume would persist and be engaged with a group of students from majority race, that they would still have a tremendous impact. So anyone ready to share? We have a quiet, shy group here this morning. Well, feel free to, if you have any thoughts, comments, to add it into the chat as we go along. And I'll proceed to talk about High School for Recording Arts. Like I said, we were founded in 1998. That's when we received our charter. And basically we came into existence to meet a need in the community. Young people were showing up to our founders' recording studio, Studio 4, wanting to promote their music, record, learn about the music business, but he realized they weren't in school. And he tried to engage them on the importance of being in school and why they weren't in school. And they said they were kicked out or they were bored. And he had the idea, well, since they're showing up to my studio every day, to start a school. And he reached out to some people he knew in education, and myself and others, and High School for Recording Arts was born. And we base our school on 4 values: family, respect, community, and education. That's really core to everything that we do. We believe that school has to matter with young people, and these values need to be fully absorbed and embedded within our young people. And one thing we're very proud of is that every student who's come through High School for Recording Arts know what those values are and really embody them. And we also base our whole program around 4 pillars. And that's we're asset-based, where we look for the genius and brilliance and creativity of a young person first, despite the fact that they may have been out of school for a period of time. They may have been involved in juvenile justice system, both which are most of our students upon enrollment. And many times these young people are used to going into systems where they're first seen as a deficit. We believe that's wrong. We believe we need to show them that we see, who they are as a creative individual, and as someone who has had life experiences worth being able to understand and absorb and to build on. But we also know that these young people need tremendous support. So we have wraparound services, because most of our young people live below the poverty line. Many are living on their own. Many are homeless and houseless. So we provide all this kind of supports that they need so they could reach their full potential: mental health services, housing support, or anything that we can do to help them become the best learner they could be. And we do this with innovative practices, as you can surmise from our name, High School for Recording Arts. We have state-of-the-art recording studios where we engage young people through a project-based process of creating real-world products. We believe in making sure that they are able to engage the world in their learning that goes beyond the building. And we do all of this with a social justice lens. We're unapologetic about the fact that we want our young people to become change agents. We want them to take this learning and do something to make our communities better. And so you go to our streaming platform and you search High School for Recording Arts, whether it's Spotify or Apple Music. No matter what, you'll see 20 years of strong demonstration of young people really taking their creativity and putting it to work, not only in terms of expressing themselves personally, but also addressing issues within the community and offering ways in which to go about creating change. So as I said in the beginning, for us, recognizing that most of the young people we serve are of color, it became very, very important that we would have staff that, as best as possible within the context of Minnesota and the available pool, have people in our space who look like our students. And we have in our mission, very first place in which we place importance of who we are, that diversity is a major part of the work that we do. So we look to have a diverse staff. And diversity means, people not only just of color, but people of all races and backgrounds working together, collaborating, problem solving together as a model for young people of how that could be. We acknowledge the fact in ways unsaid as well as said that, our founder is African-American. I, as the executive director, I'm African-American. We know that that's oftentimes rare for many of our students to see that institution in public education that has, both someone who created and leads the organization, who's that. But we also have many other people within the organization of color who we explicitly look to rise up to become leaders who come from non-traditional backgrounds. And that's, for example, within our advisory system, where we have taken our advisors to come from the community, as opposed to just being the teachers, where we have a very small percentage of African-American teachers in the state of Minnesota. So we had the chance to bifurcate our advisory from our teaching and bring in people from the community steeped in youth development, building strong relationships, really knowing how to connect with young people. And by the fact that they're from the community, literally where our students reside, they happen to be oftentimes of the same background. And we really value that. That's extremely important to us. And, on a personal level, I like to share that when I thought about the first experience with a African-American teacher, this comes from a place of experience. For me, I grew up in New York City, and I grew up in a very culturally rich African-American community in Brooklyn. And, we had music, we had food, we had, just a sense of family and community. But then when I went to PS 144 as a kindergartner, all the way to third grade, it just so happened that all I saw teaching me were white women. They were great. I mean, some were a little mean, but they were great, and good teachers and definitely well-meaning. But I wasn't able to put it into words then, but there was clearly a disconnect between where I was coming from each day in not only my home and my community, and what I was seeing inside of the building. Until one day, my teacher said the gentleman was going to come in, the teacher was going to come in to teach us music. and who walks in, this tall African-American man with a box full of plastic flutophones, and passed it out. And just like the story you just read, I remember sitting up in my chair and like, you know, because up until then I was usually staring out of the window and getting bored. I stood up, I was like, whoa, you know, who is this person in this school? And I remember very much being conscious of the fact that he looked like my father and my uncles. And I wanted to, you know, be present for him and to respect, you know, that his presence meant something to me. Again, subconsciously, but it was clear that, you know, for me inside, that was memorable because I remember it to this day. And he actually took me on a journey that began then on my, in terms of loving music as a part of learning an instrument, that led to me becoming a trumpet player all through college, and led to my life in really loving music and going into hip hop music and representing artists to this very day, the work that I do. So I give that credit to Mr. Williams. Michael?
Amazing. Well, thank you, Tony. Yes, and as the director of social impact, my story at the High School for Recording Arts actually started when I was a senior in college. I had just finished an internship at the Teachers Union in New York in their charter schools department, which for many of you may sound a little oxymoronic. The Teachers Union's charter schools department. It's another conversation for another time. I returned to Minnesota, though, having read Joe Nathan's book called Charter Schools, and wanted to stay involved because I was inspired by the notion of school choice and innovation. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, Joe, like, what's going on here that I can keep in touch with? And how can I stay connected? He said, well, what are your interests? And I was a hip hop artist at the time, still am, but retired, and view myself more as a hip hop based educator than anything. And he said, well, okay, hip hop, education, charter schools, go to the High School for Recording Arts, check it out. I called up HSRA, they put me in touch with Tony. Tony said, come on down, check out the school. And as soon as I walked in the door, I heard and felt the bass from the studios just vibrating through the walls and into my body. And I knew even before I got into the building that this was a different school, unlike any I would ever visit. And once I then entered the building, I saw students with huge smiles on their faces walking through the hallways. And it was like I'd been teleported to a different system of education within this building. And I just never really left, right? And so when it came time for me to pursue my own education, was privileged enough to get into the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where I did my master's in 2016. And when I told Tony I got in, he was like, well, you're bringing us with you, right? And I said, yes, like, how can I say no to that? And of all the courses I took, of all the lessons I was learning about the ideal school, I never saw a school that represented state-of-the-art, technology-rich learning for equity on behalf of young people who had not historically been provided those opportunities, provided in one example. And the whole time I was thinking to myself, well, but that's HSRA. Why aren't we referencing HSRA? And so I went around the school, raised some money, and brought the High School for Recording Arts out to the HGSE organization to teach the teachers. From there, we worked to open a chapter in Los Angeles, where I served as the executive director in 2018-19, which has recently spun off into a school support organization called For Learning, which is the organization through which we support schools and school districts in learning how to do what it is we've been doing at HSRA since 1998. And one of those programs that we've launched at HSRA recently is the Grow Your Own initiative. But before we get into the details of that, I'm going to walk through some findings from some research that we were able to conduct during the summer of 2020, just after George Floyd was murdered, not more than 9 miles from our school's front door, right? When we were in a space where we were asking ourselves, what can we do right now to understand what's happening with our students and with our community? And we decided to conduct a youth participatory action research project where our students were the interviewers and the interviewees. And we decided to ask them, you know, what's going on at the High School for Recording Arts that keeps bringing you through the front door every day? as it pertains to young people who, on average, have been to 4.5 other high schools before coming to the High School for Recording Arts. Why are you here? What's bringing you in? And what we found was really interesting. We found that those factors that pulled students towards HSRA were the authenticity of the organization. Students over and over said it just feels like real life. It's a small, tight-knit community offering longer hours and an authentic response from staff to real-life challenges that comes without judgment or stigma. Students kept saying that HSRA teaches stuff you actually want to learn and that you can actually use through an art-based, project-based, phenomenon-based approach to learning, rooted in students' best interests, offering agency, freedom, autonomy through their learning that's relevant. And of course, our strongest recruitment tool has been word of mouth. And so that, I think, is just evidence of the school community's connection to the broader Twin Cities community. But then we wanted to know what kept students at HSRA once they enrolled, right? What were the stick factors? And more often than not, students said that they felt like they had a strong relationship with somewhere between 5 and 6 adults in the school. When contrasted against what they were experiencing at their former schools, students were saying they maybe had 1 or 2 strong relationships, and they were usually with the hall monitor or the security guard or the counselor or a facilitator of an extracurricular program. Very rarely were they with teachers, administrators, or folks that we might consider more central to a school system's functioning. And that is one of the reasons that at HSRA, we've tried to flip that. We view all of our adults and staff members as facilitators of learning, and we don't privilege one facilitator over another. So at HSRA, deep relationships abound. We have high expectations and academic press that stem from those relationships, right? So relationships allow us to push our students. It's not that we go straight to academic press, and we call that interpersonal press. Our proactive wraparound services mean students don't have to seek us out when they're in need. Our relationships are strong enough that we know when we need to go to a student and bring counseling and so forth to them. And of course, flexible budgeting, scheduling, and so forth as part of our charter allow us to provide an education program that doesn't really feel like learning. Tony was talking about our 4 values of family, respect, community, and education. And our students told us, that's relevant because this is a predominantly Black space. The importance of Black affinity in students and staff lets students feel like a diverse group made for diverse learning experiences that fostered this shared motivation to succeed, fostered a sense of safety, a space where we could collectively reframe failure as positive. And all of that is undergirded and supported by a trauma-informed, transformative justice-based approach to student behavior. I think we'll skip this for the sake of time. And this as well, just talking about our offerings in the arts and project-based learning, travel, vocational and technical training certifications. I'd like to get to Hobin's chapter of our story, which is going to take us more deeply into our intensive Grow Your Own program that we just started this year. So Hobin, I'm going to pass it to you. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Michael. So I'm going to start just with a brief story of self. I've been a high school math educator for 8 years, 4 of them in Detroit, Michigan, where I started my teaching career right out of college, and 4 of them at the High School for Recording Arts in St. Paul. And really these last 4 years, it's been a pleasure to teach in the same city where I started my education as an ESL student, English as a second language learner. My immigrant identity is a really strong part of who I am. I mean, my name is Haben Gebergergish. I literally cannot hide my immigrant identity. It's also in my features. Even here, people will look at me and they often say, well, you're not just Black, like what else are you? Are you Somali? Are you Ethiopian? We play the guessing game. They're like, you're something else. And I always struggled for a while to how to respond to that. And now I just kind of say, well, my race is Black and my ethnicity is Eritrean. So for those of you that don't know, Eritrea is a really small nation on the east side of Africa, the Horn of Africa. And it's about the geographical size of Minnesota and about around the same population, which I always thought was kind of interesting because that's where we end up, we ended up immigrating to Minnesota. I was born in the capital of Eritrea, and I left at the age of 5 with my mom, my dad, and my younger brother. So on the left, you'll actually see a picture of us in Ethiopia. We drove to Ethiopia in order to finalize our paperwork before immigrating to the US. Since there was no embassy in Eritrea, that's where we had to go. We planned on staying in a hotel, but we found some family friends who actually found out we were staying in a hotel, and they were like, no, we're taking you in until this paperwork gets finalized. Then they housed us for 2 months. And that's where we stayed until we were able to catch our flight to the Twin Cities. To the right is a picture of me in my first US school in kindergarten. You can tell I'm a kindergartner because I probably should have wiped my nose before I took the picture, but I was little, so how would I know? But I thought it was a cute picture, so I still decided to show y'all. So I remember that year, I didn't know a lick of English. I was actually not fully literate in any language because I'd never gone to a school. All I could do was speak Tigrinya, but I'd never learned how to actually write it. And I was confused most of that year. There was just nothing really the teacher could use as a jumping off point to try to teach me English. I didn't know how to write in any language. And I remember really not understanding my teacher at all. And she was a white teacher. She was really, really kind about me not being able to understand her, but that didn't really take away from the anxiety of it all. But I eventually did learn English, as you can see. And as an immigrant and the oldest child, my life was full of firsts. The first person in my family to graduate from an American high school, the first and still the only person in my family to graduate from college, and the first person in my family to earn a master's degree. There's a lot of joy once you're actually done in being the first, when it's all said and done. I got to enjoy the victory of that this Saturday when I graduated with my master's. But through the process, and I think a little bit after too, there's a lot of anxiety, fear, and really a sense that maybe you don't belong in the space that you're taking up. I attended a primarily white institutions through high school, undergrad, and grad school. And microaggressions were a regular part of my experience. I mean, so in high school, I decided to wear my natural hair for the first time. I got this fro, and my speech coach implored me to straighten my hair by the weekend before the next tournament because it was too distracting. It would take away from what I was saying. As a student at the University of Chicago, I remember a few times people walking up to me, maybe they wanted to know where the library was, asking me if I was a student. Now I just have a backpack, I'm not a student. But at the University of Chicago, it's about 4% Black, the student body, and to them I looked more like the staff that worked in the dining hall than I did a huge Chicago student. And I think what was most disheartening about that is I was like the student of all students. I was the first one at the library, and I still get so many jokes from my friends about like, you were at the library before it even opened. Like I really leaned into my education, and for people to question whether I was a student was really disheartening. But regardless of whether you're a high achieving student with no disciplinary record, or the class clown who's always getting pushed out of class, or somewhere in between, being a Black student, being a Black person is really hard. And it's mentally and spiritually draining at times to be underestimated, which I often was, to be misunderstood, and to feel like you don't belong. And I know that having a close relationship with a Black teacher at some point in my journey, which I never got to have really until college, would have helped me tremendously. But those Black educators simply weren't there. And the few that I had, they can't be mentors to every Black child in need. We put an extraordinary burden on our Black educators or Black facilitators or advisors that are there. We need more Black teachers. And research shows this. We know that students need and crave close relationships with adults in their schools. We saw that in the NPR article that we read. We saw that in the research that Michael presented. And we know that students do better academically when they have a Black teacher. And so HSRA, through our Grow Your Own program, is part of that effort to increase the diversity of the teaching force in order to really improve the outcomes for our young Black youth. HSRA is the only single site to receive this funding. And not only that, we're the only the only recipient of that grant that is going to provide full scholarships to our students. In partnership with St. Cloud State University, we provide tuition, meal plans, health insurance, housing, supplies, and transportation for our participants, who are all going to St. Cloud State University to become licensed teachers in the state of Minnesota. They're going to have the opportunity, once they graduate and get their teaching license, to return to Minneapolis or St. Paul, where they reside, to teach. We're using a cohort model. We're not thinking of, these participants as sort of individuals on their own journey, but also as a cohort that are kind of experiencing this unique journey together, and they're being supported by close mentors. We have, myself and 2 advisors and directors that are already working with these youth, but are going to continue working with them over the next 4 to 5 years. And we've already started meeting over the last few months, 1 hour every week, to support them with things like, how do you write just making sure that they know what is a good college paper look like? What is a typical college syllabus? What are going to be those work expectations? How are you work study, filling out the FAFSA? And our support is really personalized and responsive to the unique needs of this cohort. Some of them are trying to navigate being a first-time college student, and some of them already have that experience of somebody in their family already attended. Some of them have, a full, sort of support system at home, and some of them are coming out of the foster care system. So our support is personalized to what it is that they need. And what's really important to note about this program, just one last thing, is that the students really understand the significance of them entering the teaching field. We've been really transparent about this. The program is called Grow Your Own, and it's because there really is a disparity between what the St. Paul students, Minneapolis students look like, and what the teaching force looks like. And they know that they have benefited from the relationships they have had with the Black educators at this school. I'd like to take just a little bit of time to frame just who are our students outside of just, our cohort. One thing about a lot of our students, they're very diverse, but one thing they have in common is that they've had some type of sort of negative experience with the educational institutions in the past, whether it be previous schools or otherwise. And a lot of times the things that they've experienced, the negative things, have sort of trumped the sort of brilliance that they bring. And so our goal is to help them see their brilliance and their creativity. We know our students come with, high levels of trauma. They're dealing with mental health. Maybe they're working full time. Maybe they have they've had interactions with the criminal justice system, and they've struggled with homelessness. And so our school model, if you look to the right, we have a lot of wraparound services. And I think of that term in relation to, we're really wrapping our arms around the whole child and looking at them holistically. So we have our advisory system, which is sort of kind of separate from the academics and the teaching, so that we're able to really hire people from the community that may not be licensed. Students develop personal learning plans that are not unlike what students develop at the college level when they're creating their own schedule and sort of identifying goals, and everyone sort of has their own life path. We have social workers and therapists, we have youth advocates. And the reason I'm bringing this up is to kind of show how we're approaching this cohort model and the support system. Is we are thinking about, the holistic student that's about to enter this teaching field. We know that they're going to have unique challenges because of where they come from. We know that there's going to be times where they're going to need support with mental health. We know that they're going to need those things. And so we plan to support them throughout all of that. Another really important part of our program, in relation to just making sure they, that they feel connected to the institution they're about to go to, is making sure that they visit St. Cloud State University. So a couple of weeks back, Tony, myself, and Michael traveled with the students to St. Cloud in order to kind of show them the campus, get a tour, and help them build relationships with some of the departments and the people that they're going to be working with over the next 4 years. So they got to check out, go back just a little bit. So they got to check out the radio station that's there. They got to learn a little bit about study abroad and that they can pursue that in their first year. So they have had an awesome time, and this is just the beginning of their journey. Another way that we really connect students, I mentioned before, we're really transparent about what this program, the GYO program, is for. And we want students to be a part of that understanding and be advocates for increasing the diversity of the workforce, and so of the teaching force. So in connection to that, we actually a couple months back wrote a song. The students created an original song and a music video that articulates to young people of color, why we need more Black teachers and why they should consider becoming educators. So I'm gonna let Michael play that, and then hopefully people have some thoughts.
Me becoming an educator definitely came from my college experience and feeling like there were a lot of things that I needed that I did not get. Because I attended a predominantly white high school. I also attended a predominantly white university, and I wanted to be the kind of student affairs professional that I wanted and needed at the time, because I came into college, low income, Black, first generation, and there were not really a lot of resources for students like me. So I wanted to be the support for students that I felt that I needed.
Let me holler at you if you Hispanic. Let me holler at you if you Asian. Let me holler at you. And if you Native American, let me holler at you too. Listen. Let me tell you why people like you and me should be teaching. I know you watch how the students act and don't want to be treated. They act like dealing with children the same as being defeated. But it's way deeper than that, and you the type that can see it. So listen, a profession, a direct a mission. Gotta keep the babies from slipping, maybe keeping the daddies from ripping. A mission that calls all connection. Introducing melanin a blessing. Racism's not what I'm stressing, but BIPOC professor, that's next man. And I ain't saying segregation is the way. All I'm saying is it's easier to learn when you can't relate. And if you can't learn, you gon' end up in a very dark place. But when you can, the whole wide world will tumble right onto your plate. www.youarethefuture.com. No one can prove me wrong. Trying to make your legacy long and get to teaching kids to defer the words right from wrong. We need you to sing your song. Tell them children sing along, just like this. Listen.
We need people like you to fill the gap. The current educational system, it is a trap. There's been way too many things already said to take it back. Now we hiring the teachers that's Native, Hispanic, and Black. And we gon' take this notion around the world. It's a mission that we don't get acknowledged underneath them curls. Switching it up, getting it right so every kid can get a portion. Here's the section where we get deeper than the ocean.
Listen, it's written in history that we don't get it nice. Had to fight to get into white schools, can't take it light. Border schools, another thing that was written in the night. How about we talk about the facts and drag it out into the light? Yeah, that's right, the difference in culture says that we ain't civilized. Told us lies, beat us up, then started cutting ties. Cut off our long braids and said that they needed to see our eyes. Pools of honey, I can't blame you, but I don't see why, cause it's unjust. The type of thing that makes you wanna put your money up. Save the dough until you got enough to blow something up. But let's stop talking about the violence, let's just run it up. But I'ma really hit home with this lyric that's coming up. Yeah, I sat in the back feeling stupid. Teach on my back cause I'm truant. On the way to the school I heard shooting. So learning is not what I'm doing. I'm wishing I already knew it. Maybe then I wouldn't feel so stupid. They gave me the test and I blew it. If only teach can maybe want it, I would like it. I'd be on it, never on it. Gears turning, in learning, out learning. Never slurring, tables turning, fires burning. Oh, and did you know that if you teach it, you get more vacation than any field? Enough of breaking it down. It's time to really build. Fill your mind up with the knowledge and then lock it with a seal. And if you don't, what you think will be trumped by what you feel. Let's put down the couch, pick up the pots, learn how to make a meal.
If you native, let me holler at you. If you Asian, hey, let me holler at you.
So my philosophy is students should be centered.
All right. And there it was. Well done, Hobbin. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the question is, where do we go from here? Well, this is our first year. Our first cohort will be going to St. Cloud State next year. And our hope is to be able to continue to provide this opportunity to students in years to come. We know we've got about 7 or 8 minutes left, and we wanted to make sure there was space for folks to ask questions and for us to answer those as best we can. And so we want to turn there now and just open the floor. You can drop a question or a thought, comment in the chat. Please also feel free to just unmute and join the conversation that way. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and feel free to jump in. The question is, how did we pick St. Cloud State as our partner? Actually, initially, we had hoped and planned to work with the University of Minnesota through their direct track to teaching program, but we weren't awarded the scholarship program until after the University of Minnesota's application process had closed. And so they actually no longer became a viable institution. And it turns out that the St. Cloud State Teaching Prep Program is led by Mike Dando, a professor named Mike Dando, who is a hip hop based educator and takes a hip hop based approach to teacher preparation. St. Cloud State is also an institution that offers every area of licensure available in Minnesota, which opens up the possibility for choice greatly to our students. And they were so enthusiastic about partnering with us that they waived tuition and fees for our students altogether. Whereas the University of Minnesota has a tuition waiver for students as long as they meet a certain threshold of income on an annual basis. St. Cloud did not have that obstacle. And so while we know that our students are deserving of full ride scholarships, we didn't want there to be any obstacles in the way to their accessing that. Great question.
Do you have an estimate of how much you think each student will cost to get through university?
Yeah, should be about $103,000. And that's not adjusting for inflation, which we did do on the back end. It's just like the math. That's the more complex math that we don't need to get into with you all here.
I apologize, I'm en route. I just wanted to say thank you for centering the conversation first around the story with NPR and with Havin sharing her experience. I'm wondering about what I heard was some visits up to campus and things like that were done this year. Are there other activities or things that have already taken place or that you plan to do with future cohorts to kind of help prepare them while they're in high school still with you? And when do you think, like, would you start some of that with 10th and 11th grade even?
Yeah, and Haben, I'll let you speak to some of this, but I will say that one thing we had asked for funding to do was be intentional about bringing the students back to the High School for Recording Arts quarterly and hosting them for on-campus counseling, and then also hosting an annual retreat for our students so that we could build team and reflect and process the experiences they were having on campus as college students. That's perhaps the most important part of this that would ensure their completion. It's also the one part that we did not receive funding for. And so it's a piece we're hoping to fundraise on the back end to do. We also know that students are more successful in college when they've had some college experience. And so we're providing them this summer with a 2-month, or maybe it's a month long, I forget the specific details, but it's an on-campus intensive at St. Cloud State. In the future, we do hope to focus on students who've had PSEO or college and schools experiences that we do provide at the High School for Recording Arts, knowing that that will also support them in their success in the future. But this year, we've been doing things very intentionally, given that this is our first group, in preparing them. And Haben, I wonder if you'd be willing to speak to some of that.
Yeah, for sure. So in relation to just keeping students supported, we've been meeting very consistently every Friday for the last few months, going over things like I mentioned, how to write 5-paragraph essays. What are going to be some expectations in college? Can you do work study? How does that work? My colleague, Maureen Foss, is really knowledgeable about the college process, how to get in and how to get through college. And then we, we're really student-centered. So the things that we're going to be meeting consistently every Friday. As far as the things we discuss, it's going to depend on what their needs are and what questions that they have. So we're going to meet every Friday and stay connected to what's going on with them and sort of cater those weekly sessions to what it is that they need. Most recently, we really have been focusing on literacy and the kind of math and science literacy that's going to be expected of them walking in. So we're just doing like running through an ACT exam, not timed, but just kind of going through the material so they can understand where their gaps are and work towards kind of filling those before they get to school.
I think we probably have time for one last question and then we'll wrap up here.
I saw something in the chat. Right now, our cohort is 3. Michelle asked about the size of our initial cohort. It's 3. Oh yeah, you answered that, Michael.
Where do you find outside mentors to walk with these youth? So I'm not sure, Brad, what maybe you could say more about walking with, or are you just talking about like facilitating their experience, being there with them throughout?
My thinking in that question is that you're taking a group of kids who have been in a supportive family environment and you're moving them to an environment that's very different from what they're used to. And who are the people that just walk with them day to day in a situation like that to give them that support in that family?
Yeah, so we actually had support from the Posse Foundation in fleshing out this grant. They're really focused on cohorting students as they go through the college experience. And that's something that we are supporting this group of students in being for each other. So they have each other first, right? They've been to high school together, now they're going to college together. We've also really worked with the St. Cloud State group to develop those mentors on campus as well. So when we went out to visit, the first person they met was the university president. She came out, shook their hands and said, whatever you need, I'm here for you. But then they also met instructors of ethnic studies courses on campus, facilitators of the Health and Wellness Institute, the person who runs the fitness facilities, and so many other organizations that are going to be filling those roles. And then the last thing we asked for in our grant proposal was to be able to fund someone at HSRA to, as you said, walk with them through this experience. And we did receive funding for that. So we're excited to be able to support them in those ways. All right, well, thank you so much. Yes, Amy, I was just gonna wrap up. Is that where you were headed? Cool. Thank you everyone so much for being here with us. Again, we are the High School for Recording Arts. Our contact information is all here. Let's see if we can get there quickly enough. Yes, feel free to reach out, ask us questions. We'd be happy to connect with any of you offline. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much. This was fantastic. And thank you to Haben, Michael, and Tony, and all the HSRA team. I know several of your colleagues may be here too. I'm going to head over to the main plenary session, and I hope you will join us there. There's also a link for the feedback form. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone, thank you.